It's official, as multiple surprising reports that have come out today have revealed Evgeni Malkin's future in Pittsburgh. And we also get some insight into Kyle Dubas' plan heading into not only next season, but the next 5 years of Pittsburgh Penguins hockey. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Penguins Digest, because some of these details from this report will have Penguins fans shocked, mad, all of the emotions. We're going to break it all down. But before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 68% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the Pittsburgh Penguins, this is the place to be for all your daily Pittsburgh Penguins content. So go down below, hit that free subscribe button, and again, you get to stay up to date with everything Pittsburgh Penguins. But Mark, let's dive right into it. This is not a report I was expecting to see today, but it does give us some insight into the future of the Penguins, and not just this season coming up, but next season and the next couple. And it is Kyle Dubas and the Pittsburgh Penguins have officially announced that they are not going to be re-signing Evgeni Malkin to a contract extension. Now, he does have 1 year left. He is going to play the 2025-2026 campaign, but it sounds like they won't re-sign him, and he could actually be headed for retirement. Not even going to stay in the league, which I think is interesting, but we're going to dive into the specifics. And this is from Josh. It's not known if Evgeni Malkin is going to retire from hockey after this season, but from what he's heard, and again, multiple reports that came out today, this season will be his last as a Pittsburgh Penguin. They are not going to sign him to a contract extension. And while it remains unclear if Malkin will retire, they are not going to offer him another contract. And this is from sources within the organization. So I guess not directly from Kyle Dubas, but Mark, what are your thoughts on this? Because Malkin the last couple seasons, we'll get into his stats, all of that, hasn't been that great. It sounds like the Penguins under Kyle Dubas are going in a completely different direction. You know, there was a lot of backlash in terms of not necessarily retaining Sidney Crosby and Evgeni Malkin during Ron Hextall's tenure as GM, but the term and the AAV on the contracts, a lot of backlash and stuff like that. So what's your take on this? It looks like, you know, this is the first, you know, inkling of, we know that they're moving in a new direction.
I mean, looking at this, there's so many things to break down. First off, when you're looking at Sidney Crosby, you're looking at Malkin as the Robin to Crosby as Batman.
Yeah.
These are a pairing that we've seen together through their entire career. They won Stanley Cups. The big thing is this direction feels a little weird from management. I mean, Malkin felt like a guy that would continue playing until he wanted to retire on his own terms. But seeing the reports that Malkin wanted to stay a lifelong Penguin, we've seen him here his whole career. It does feel really weird. It's going to be really uncertain if we see him go to maybe the KHL. Maybe he retires and quits hockey altogether, but in my opinion, this is not a guy that's going to go out and sign another contract with another team. I can't picture him putting on a different jersey of any other team minus the Penguins. But looking at Malkin as a whole, yes, losing a guy like this does suck. You're going into a youth direction. He has regressed a tiny bit. Yep. If you want to fix his regression, go get Phil Kessel. We've seen how well and productive they were together. All jokes, but maybe not. Looking at this Penguins team without Malkin, I think it does leave a big gaping hole. I know he spoke a lot on recent inquiries from last season, but overall, Darius, it does feel like a situation that might go a little south if the Penguins organization does push him out the door on their own.
And listen, I can understand last season, you know, plagued with some injuries, right? We can take that into account. But if you look at everything last season, he had 50 points in 68 games. He was a minus 24. Like, it was an awful season. And you can take it, you know, out of context if you want. If you can look at it and be like, listen, it's just one season. He didn't play all 82 games. Well, the 2 seasons before that, he wasn't that great either, especially the 2 seasons ago, I guess, at this point, 23-24. He wasn't great again. So I hate to throw the word regressed around, you know, too loosely, but it does look like he is regressing. So it could make some sense from the Penguins side of things. And like you said, I can't really see him in a different team's jersey, at least if it's not via trade. But I think that boat or that ship has sailed at this point. Like, that is not going to happen. If it was going to happen, it would have happened a few years ago. Then he got that new contract. You know they're not going to trade him now under this new contract. They're going to ride it out this season. We know that. So I just don't see him signing another contract. He could actually end up retiring, which is crazy, because Malkin, a lot of people don't realize, this is cap hit, but you know, he's been insane over his career. And again, the last couple seasons, not great, a lot of injuries, all of that. But he is quite literally, I think, the third best player of an entire generation that is slowly, you know, retiring at this point or getting a little bit older. So it's pretty interesting. As you can see here, the most point per game seasons in NHL history, Evgeni Malkin is 4th in the entire history of the NHL. Sidney Crosby, by the way, setting that this year. Pretty incredible. But 4th all-time with 15. He's a top 20 player in NHL history, and he's been absolutely fantastic, but it looks like his time could be done. So, again, I understand maybe the frustration, the anger from Penguins fans getting this news today, but I think this is a signal that, they're not going to be trading Sidney Crosby, Letang, Malkin. That I don't think that's happening, but I do think that this is the beginning of the end for at least a few of them, and Sidney Crosby to usher in this new era of young players.
And I mean, the big thing is you're looking at so many Penguins legends. I mean, looking at the list, 15 point per game seasons is insane. Looking at this, I mean, look at the people above him. Gordie Howe. We see Wayne Gretzky, of course, Sidney Crosby, the greatest player of all time. But the big thing is we've seen Math just recently retire. We're going to see Malkin probably go to a new team or retire from the NHL. I think the direction, listen, I understand you don't want to move on from Malkin. If you could bring him back on a cheaper cap hit, put him into a lower role as the young guys usher in, I think this would be the best way to go. But I guess Kyle Dubas looked at this, the retool, and says, hey, maybe we move on from some of these veteran guys. We get younger guys in the lineup. It would be interesting to see, maybe going into next year's trade deadline, if a team is looking desperately for someone to fill the top 6 on center or the wing, do you think there's going to be teams calling? Because in my opinion, someone's going to call on his availability, and it would not shock me if Dubas looked at this and said, hey, why don't we get some retained assets for a guy that's not coming back?
Well, like Dubas said, and first of all, I did want to touch on the list, like you mentioned, Gordie Howe right above Evgeni Malkin, but Gordie Howe played for like 50 years, I think. So very impressive stuff for Evgeni Malkin. But I think it's an interesting question that you bring up, because I think if you come down to the trade deadline and the Penguins look like they're not going to be making the playoffs again, which we don't know. Anything can happen in this league. Maybe they're in the race again. Last year wasn't great, but there's been seasons where they've been close, right? And if they're kind of out of the race again, like you said, there's going to be teams calling. And I think if you're Kyle Dubas, you look at it like, hey, we're in the execution phase of this rebuild, the retool, whatever you want to call it. We're still trying to accumulate assets, but at the same time, not be afraid to spend them and get better. We can get a ton of assets for this guy if we talk to him. I say this guy, I want to respect him, Evgeni Malkin. But, we can talk to Evgeni Malkin and be like, listen, do you want to go somewhere else? Totally understand if you don't want to. We're not going to re-sign you, though. But we can send you to a contender with a bunch of retained salary. We're going to get some assets in return. It's going to help the organization. And you go out and try and win one last Stanley Cup if you are planning on retiring, right? So I think that the Penguins actually, in announcing this today, you bring up a great point, have kind of set up themselves at the trade deadline now that if they are out of it, they can at least go to Malkin and be like, listen, do you want to go win another Stanley Cup? You can stay here, no problem, right? But, we could use some assets in return that then we can flip, help the organization, help build this roster a little bit more. And then obviously you can go out, try to win one more Stanley Cup, and then retire right off into the sunset if you'd like. So I think it's going to be very interesting. But that's it for this one. Let us know how you feel about this report today. Pretty interesting stuff. There's a lot going on with the Pittsburgh Penguins, as you can see here. Dan Muse also spoke out that he's reached out to 95% of all the players under contract. He's ready to get going with his new plan. They still have to put together the rest of his coaching staff as well, so we'll keep tabs on that. But it's going to be a very interesting next couple of weeks heading into the draft. And I don't suspect, any of the top guys like Malkin, Crosby, or Letang will be traded like immediately, but I do think they've set this themselves up now that they could make some interesting moves at next year's trade deadline. But let us know how you feel in the comments, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything Pittsburgh Penguins.